Hi, welcome to Color Mixing Essentials. I am so glad you're taking this course because many of my students have found it to be very beneficial and helpful to know how to mix colors and what an impact it has had on their art making. So I'm going to quickly go over the benefits of mixing color. Number one, when you know how to mix color and you understand what colors work together, you have the flexibility to create color combinations that are dynamic, that are harmonious, that actually create a mood. Maybe you want to create a piece that's more subdued versus something that's more vibrant. When you know how to mix color, you can duplicate a color that you see that you like out in nature or in an image. And you have that opportunity to say, hey, I like that orange. I want to recreate that in my artwork. When you know how to mix color, you become more comfortable with painting overall. So I'm so glad you're taking this course. This is part one. And I'm going to go over some samples here that I have from my demos in my mixed media classes. And these are really great samples of how color works. For example, what I normally do in my mixed media class, my basic mixed media class, is I'll have my students work with collage material, and then the collage material actually dictates the color scheme. So with this, as I was demonstrating, I liked this image, and then I also liked a little bit of this green that was in this wrapping paper, the scrap of wrapping paper. But because I knew how to mix color, I could actually duplicate that green and put it over some of the other areas of the artwork. I was also able to duplicate this copper in this area as well. Knowing color also helps you to understand what color compositions go together, and this is a really good example. Here's another one where I had the collage material dictate the color scheme. I duplicated again. I duplicated this sort of yellow, light yellow cream color, and then I was able to put that on the rest of the surface. I also knew that this red here was not necessarily straight out of the tube red or bright apple red, but it was kind of a rust color, so I was able to integrate some of that red in here as well. This is a really good example of how color can be very vibrant, and because these two colors are considered complementary colors, and I will go over that as well, the importance of complementary colors, but how when you combine them on your art piece, they actually become very dynamic and can be there's a lot of energy in your piece when you combine complementary colors. Here's another example of complementary colors, because the complementary color of yellow is violet. And again, this creates a very vibrant and energetic piece. Also, another really good thing about mixing color is that there was this sort of bluish gray in the background of this image. And I wanted to extend that gray across the top. So what I did was I mixed gray, white, and black, of course, but I knew that there was a little bit of purple in that gray. And a lot of people would say, well, I can't see that, but as you build a sensitivity to color mixing and an eye for color, you can pick up the subtleties in different shades of gray, different shades of color. So that's also a very good benefit of knowing how to mix color. This is an example of, again, complementary color. The opposite of yellow on the opposite of red on the color wheel is green. And that's one of the reasons why this kind of works together. So that's really a good example. Another thing that's really good about knowing how to mix color is that you can, for example, there's different shades of green here. We have very bright, sort of apple green here. We have a turquoise green here. And then we have a sort of yellow olive green here. And you can see how these are different from each other, but then when you mix colors, you know what colors go together to make your green more yellow or make your green more turquoise. So that's just a side note that I wanted to go over. I'm going to quickly now go over the materials, which are going to be very important. You want to get a pad of watercolor paper, and one of the things that's very important and why I like this is that this is 140 pound, and that means the higher the number, the thicker the paper. So this is very thick watercolor paper, so this is really good to use. And also, you should have downloaded the PDF that comes with this course so that you have these printouts, the materials list, and then also the notes and charts for the course. When it comes to color mixing, you want some sort of palette plate to mix your colors in. I normally use a butcher tray. They call this a butcher tray. This is commonly sold in art stores. Michaels. Artists have been using this for centuries. I like it because it not only has a kind of a wall that can keep the paint within the tray, but this is made out of, it's actually glazed iron. Very easy to wash and wash your paints off. You can also use a paper plate, not a paper plate, but a plastic plate. I would suggest make sure it's white. Don't use a plastic plate that has some sort of color, because that will really affect your color mixing, and you won't really have a pure sense of what you're mixing on the plate. So definitely use white. I know some people like using these. I personally don't. I feel like what happens is that when you start mixing in these little areas, you run out of room, and you really need a lot of room to mix. So I wouldn't suggest using these guys. You also want to have, for this portion of the course, you want to have some sort of round template, because we're going to be creating a color wheel. And that color wheel is going to require a round template, drawing a round circle on your watercolor paper. So it can either be a plate. This I got, I think it was in the cake mixing, baking section of Michael's, where you could actually get a round piece of cardboard, or just a plastic plate would be fine. If you're comfortable using a compass, you can even use a compass to draw a circle as well. You're also going to need 30-60 degree triangle. That's going to be very important when we draw these slices, and I will go over how we're going to actually draw these onto your watercolor paper. But you're going to need, now this is a right angle, this is considered a right angle, and then this is considered 30-60 degree. So you want to make sure that what you're using actually has this same angle. And I'm going to explain why that's very important. You also want to have a set of brushes. Brushes are very important. The reason why I'm asking you to have multiple brushes is that way you can, when you go to mix a different color, you can use a clean brush. I'm going to explain the importance of using clean brushes when you're mixing color. You do not want your colors to cross over, but I'm going to remind you the importance of that. Here I have like 3 medium size. These are small, and then you can get even a few smaller ones like this if you want. But make sure that you have a few multiple brushes, not just one. And most important is the color, the acrylic colors that we're going to be using. Now the reason why I'm using acrylic is it's easier to work with. It's water soluble, and it dries fast. So we're going to be using acrylics for this course. These are the 5 colors that you're going to be working with. Primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, and then white and black. Now, I can't emphasize the importance of this needs to be called primary red, primary yellow, and primary blue. This is the true colors that makes the color wheel. So you don't want to use another type of red like cadmium red or deep yellow, orange yellow, or ultramarine blue. That's going to throw off your color wheel. So make sure you have primary red, yellow, and blue. And then we're going to have black and white. These are going to be used to tint and shade these colors. Okay? You also want a cup of water for your brushes. And you're going to need a Sharpie and a pencil. And then also I'm going to show you how to clean your brushes. So you want to make sure you pick up one of these, the Master's brush cleaner. If you don't want to spend the money for this, because this was about $12 in the store, you can just get like a regular bar of soap if you want. That's fine too. But I'm going to show you how to keep your brushes clean as well. Okay, well, let's get started on the color wheel. Okay, we're going to get started in creating a color wheel. Now, the importance of a color wheel is that you will understand how to mix the colors in between the primary colors, which is yellow, blue, and red. So we're going to go over how to mix your secondary colors. The secondary colors are the colors that come from mixing both actually two primary colors. So in this case, you have yellow and red make orange, red and blue make violet, and blue and yellow make green. So your secondary colors would be considered orange, violet, and green. Then you have your tertiary colors, which are the colors in between. So for example, yellow and orange make yellow-orange, red and orange make red-orange, and then red-violet, blue-violet, blue-green, and yellow-green. And those are your tertiary colors. On this printout, I also have it broken down where these are your primary colors, these are your secondary colors, and then these are your tertiary colors. Okay, so we're going to actually mix all these colors on the color wheel. And this not only gives you an exercise to mixing the color, but it also will give you a resource that you can refer back to, because then you'll have a color wheel of your own. So make sure that you have this page printed out. It's probably, depending on your color printer, it might have a shift in color. So I'm going to just walk you through in terms of how to mix the colors so that you can get as close as possible. Here's an example of what you're going to be creating, and this is on the watercolor paper. This is a color wheel that I created for class, and you can see that it's all the colors are there, and you're going to have something you can refer to. Okay, so we're going to start out by creating this color wheel. So we have to draw that out first. Like again, if you want to go ahead and draw with a compass, you can do that. I'm going to be using this plate, since I know it's just very easy and it fits within this paper format. And you want to put it in the center, because you're gonna actually create some labels outside of your color wheel. So make sure you have some space for that. That's another thing you want to make sure is when you create your circle, you have some space around the circle. Okay, so now you've drawn your circle on your watercolor paper, and then I'm going to get a ruler, and depending on the measurement of your circle, because it might be different based on whatever you use to create your circle, but in my case, my circle is 8.5 inches wide. I'm going to find the center point of that. So half of 8.5 is 4.25, and I'm just going to mark that. So whatever measurement is your full width of your circle, divide that by 2, and you get your center point. And I'm just marking my center point. And then what I'm going to do is now draw a straight line. And the things I like about these triangles is that you could, what you can do is you can actually line this up to the edge of your paper and get a straight line. You don't have to worry about it being crooked. And then I'm going to again draw a horizontal line in the center of the circle. So again, I'm going to line up the edge of the triangle to the edge of the paper. Make sure that's in line with the center of the circle, because I marked that as the center, and let's draw a horizontal line. Okay, so you can see now we have 4 even sections of that circle. And what we're shooting for is 12 slices. You have 4 sections, and you're going to have 3 slices per section, which will give you 12 slices. So what's great again about this is that you can draw your slices just by lining up, and actually I'm going to use a smaller one because it'll be easier to see. Because this angle is exactly 1/3, it's going to give you exactly 3 slices in that section. So that's 1 slice, and what I did is I lined this up with the center, horizontal center line, and I just drew a line across, and that gave me my first slice. Now if I line it up with the vertical, I have my second slice. Now I have 3 slices. Now you're going to do that all the way around, okay, with your triangle. This is why it's so important to have the correct 30-60 degree triangle. If you had another triangle, then you would not get these even thirds. So I'm going to go ahead and do this all the way around the circle. Okay, so now I have 12 slices, and that should be exactly 12 slices. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Sharpie, and we're going to label these slices so we know which slice, what color each slice is going to be. So again, you have this on your printout, and you're going to label each slice color. So what we have is this one, which is to the right of your center, is going to be yellow. And then I'm going to put a P there in parentheses because that's considered a primary color. And then you want to go 4 slices to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's going to be red. Again, that's going to be a primary color, so that's going to be in parentheses P. So we're going to go 4 slices to the left, clockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's going to be blue. So now you have your primary colors down. Okay, going back to your yellow, what you want to do is go 2 slices down, and that's going to be your secondary color of orange when you mix yellow and red. So we're going to label this. So 1, 2. So this is the 3rd slice, orange. And I'm going to put an S because that's going to be considered a secondary color. Okay? Now we're going to go and find our violet. So find your red, and then two slices from your red is going to be violet. Again, that's your secondary color, so I'm going to put S. Now we're going to find green. Again, we're going to 2 slices from blue, right? Because yellow and blue make green. This is going to be your green slice. Okay, now we're going to label our tertiary colors, which is the colors that come from mixing 1 primary and 1 secondary. So this one in between yellow-orange will become called yellow-orange. And I'm going to put in parentheses T for tertiary. And then this is going to be red-orange, because in between red and orange, again, 1 primary, 1 secondary, is going to be red-orange. Now the reason why I'm going through this is going to get you familiar, sort of starting to get you familiar with the colors on the color wheel before you start painting. And then in between red and violet is red-violet. In between blue-violet is blue-violet. In between blue and green is blue-green. And then lastly, between yellow and green is yellow-green. So there you go. You now have your color wheel labeled, and we're ready to start painting each slices. Okay, we're ready to start painting our color wheel. We're going to start with the yellow and red to begin with, okay? So we're just going to start working with just these 2 colors. And then as we start introducing blue, we're going to clean our brushes or get a clean brush. So what you want to do is you want to just make sure you put a few teaspoons on your palette. You don't want to glob on a couple of tablespoons of paint, because then you'll just have too much paint wasted. So just start out with a couple of teaspoons of paint. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you have a lighter color and a darker color, a more dominant color, keep in mind that red will actually overpower yellow very quickly. This is in general with any color. If you have a lighter color versus a darker color, when you're mixing, You want to mix the dark, you want to dip into the dark color and put it into the light color. That way you have more control over how much that dominant or dark color goes into your light color. And I will remind you of that throughout the course and as we're color mixing. So we'll get started with yellow. We're going to paint our first primary slice yellow. And I'm not going to shoot for perfection here. This is really for you to have an exercise of learning how to paint and mix. So you can see I'm just filling in the slice. And if you go outside the line, don't worry about it, that's okay. Okay, so that's your first slice. Now you want to get a whole new brush. I'm going to put the yellow brush down. I'm going to get a new brush that is clean for the primary red. Another thing you want to keep in mind is you don't want to have any water in your bristles because that will water down the paint as well. We are working straight out of the tube here, so you want to get that opacity. Opacity is the amount of coverage on the paper. The more translucent a paint is, the more of the white of the paper you see. And if you mix too much water in there, it's going to be very hard to get the opacity and the brilliance of that color. Okay, so that's red. Now I'm going to go for yellow, the secondary color, which is orange. So let's go back to our yellow brush and slowly start mixing. So I'm going to mix in a third area here, orange. Again, you can refer to your printout as well so that you can see the difference between yellow orange and orange, because there's more yellow in the orange. So refer to that when you're trying to get that next color, that pure orange. Now I'm using the tip of the brush to almost outline that triangle. Again, don't worry about perfection here. Okay, so now we're going to go with these two colors, which are the tertiary colors. Tertiary colors, again, is primary, 50% primary. Well, let me just back up here. When you're doing your secondary, think of your secondary as being 50% yellow, 50% red. That means 50% of each primary color. When you're doing your tertiary color, same thing. 50% yellow, 50% orange. So now that I already have that orange mixed, I'm going to start mixing more yellow into that to get that yellow-orange. Because as you remember, that yellow-orange is pretty yellow compared to the orange. Also, another thing I want you to keep in mind is when you're mixing, make sure you push your bristles down so that you're getting the full mixed color in your bristles. If you have too much dark orange or red in here, then it's going to bleed out and affect the color when you paint. So I'm always pushing the bristles down to make sure it all mixes in. Okay, there's my yellow-orange. And how you know you've reached that correct color is that it looks in between those two slices that you're actually painting in between. That's your tertiary color. Okay, now I'm going to do the other tertiary color, which is red-orange. This one is going to take more red. It's going to be redder than that orange. I think I actually have it right here. Yeah. If you start putting it down and it looks like, oh my God, that looks a little bit too close, then you can still paint over it while it's wet. There you go. Okay, so now that we're introducing, now what you want to do is take your brushes and make sure you keep your brushes wet after you're done with them, so that the paint doesn't dry on the bristles. Okay, I'm actually pushing the brushes down to try to get that paint off. So we're going to start introducing blue. So you want to get your blue paint. Okay, so now we're ready to start painting this section, which is the blue and the red. And I have my blue and my red. I cleaned my brushes thoroughly. And make sure that you squeeze out all the water from your bristles. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and paint the primary blue slice. Now I know this is really technical stuff versus doing mixed media, which is so much more fun, but once you've walked through this entire course, it will really free you up when you're doing your mixed media pieces. So I know this could be a little technical, maybe a little boring, but although some people don't find this boring, but if you do find it boring, just hang in there. You'll just get through this course and you'll feel much more comfortable mixing colors when you start working on your art pieces, whatever those art pieces are, whether it's mixed media, you know, visual journaling. Okay, I got the blue, and now what I'm going to do is mix my secondary color, which is blue and red, and I'm going to start mixing, making a little third area here for my violet. Now, when you're mixing these two colors, they're both pretty dominant colors, so it's going to be, they will get dominant very quickly. So when you're creating these colors, there are some subtleties when they shift over to red violet and blue violet. So here's lavender, or violet. Okay, now we're going to do the red violet, so we're going to add more red to that violet that we just put down. And this is kind of more of a, now your printout might look a little different, so you know, try your best to use your instincts when you're mixing these two colors. Remember, the easiest way to see if you have the correct color is it should look like it's in between this and not similar. If it's too violet, then you need to add more red. If it's too red, you need to add more violet. So this red violet should almost look sort of, I don't know, I want to say kind of a eggplant purple. Now, I hope you notice that when I'm mixing, I'm not mixing a lot, because if you get too much paint there, it's going to be hard to get that, it'll be harder to get that correct color with that amount of paint, because then you feel like you have to make that whole blob of paint look exactly the same. So I'm actually working with small amounts of paint. Okay, so now we're going to go blue-violet. I'm adding a lot of blue to that violet, that blue-violet. Okay, so now we have 3 slices left. Ooh, this is exciting. We're getting close to completing the wheel, the color wheel. So you want to get a whole new brush. Put this in your cup. You're going to get a clean brush, and you're going to start introducing yellow and blue. Now, this is very important. I'm going to do this. I would go switch this tray over so that I'm working completely separate from the red, because we don't want to cross-contaminate the greens. And this is what you'll learn in the complementary colors. When you cross-contaminate opposites, they can start to get very muted and very gray. So what I'm doing here is I'm just separating it from the red. I'm making sure there's no red paint anywhere in my mixing area. So we're going for green, which consists of only yellow and blue. %50 yellow, 50% blue. If your green is looking too blue, then you've gone over too much to the blue-green. So you want to have that sort of a real pure green here. That's pretty good. So now we're going to do the yellow-green. Actually, let's do the blue-green. I'm going to add more blue to that green that I just mixed. And this is a tough one because blue-green is often, we call it turquoise or teal. And on the color wheel, when you're using primary colors, you can't really get a pure teal. It's just the nature of the colors. So don't worry about this. This is often what happens is we just buy a tube of teal because you cannot duplicate that sort of vibrant turquoise with primary colors. And when you're mixing this blue-green, it's going to be pretty dark. But it should look pretty turquoise. There should be a hint of turquoise in there. So when that paper comes through, you can almost see that teal. And you can see how that blue-green is very different than that green. Okay, so we're doing our last slice, which is yellow-green. And remember, that's going to be very lime looking. So we're going to mix a lot of yellow. Since our brush has a lot of green in it, we're going to mix a lot of yellow in there. Here's a good example of that blue is very dominant. And I can't seem to get that yellow to chill out the green. So I'm going to do, actually I'm actually pretty close. I'm going to just add a little bit more yellow here. That's a good example of, I had a lot of blue in my bristles, so it might have been good to clean that. So that's pretty close, actually. Yeah, I want that lime green. There you go. You are done with your color wheel. Congratulations. You have your first color wheel, and I hope you had fun doing that. I think it's kind of cool. What's exciting is how when you start mixing colors, they get very, they change and they shift. Okay, so that's the end of part one. And an optional thing that you can do, and this is optional, you don't have to do it, but what I've done is I would cut out a couple of magazine clippings. You know, I have a couple of magazine clippings that I feel like, oh, that actually looks like, you know, red violet. And I would cut it out and then just glue them right next to, you know, like a little sliver of them next to the color. And that helps you start to recognize the similarity, the shifts in color. Like, for example, this is more red violet, and then this is more blue violet, right? And then this is more close to, it doesn't have to be exact, but it's close to the yellow green. So that's optional, but you can, if you feel like you want to do some extra, this is part of developing your eye to match that color when you see it in photographs. That's something you can do as extra. Awesome. So you've completed your color wheel, and we're ready to move on to part two, tints and shades.